wanted to get started with our 7 o'clock. We had a late addition to our agenda on Friday regarding 9 Air Road. Unfortunately, we just got the information, the plan sent over today. So is it Matthew Field and Greg Roy? Yes, we'll promote Mr. Roy. He should be on his way. Oh, and Jim's in there too. Let me get him on as a panelist. Hi, Mr. Roy. How are you?
Good, sir. How are you? Well, thank you for the time this evening. Are we ready to?
Yeah. Do you have a plan you can share? Can you share your screen?
I can. Yep.
Great.
Bear with me. How's that? Can you see that screen?
Yes.
Okay. Well, thanks very much. I see that we're you have obviously other things on the agenda, so I'll try to be as brief as I can. Appreciate the time this evening. My name is Greg Roy with Dillis and Roy, and I'm representing the applicant this evening for the project at 7, 9, 11, and 13 Air Road. The project, of course, includes 4 new house lots. The house lots have been created through the A&R process and have been recorded. The applicant earlier this year opted to permit the access to the 4 lots as a common driveway and has received a special permit from the planning board for that infrastructure. And about that same time, we thought that since there was going to be shared services, such as the road and utilities and things, that a shared septic system in this location would work pretty well. So what we have submitted, again, earlier this year, is a shared system for 4 4-bedroom lots. So we have a shared system. The leaching field would be back here in the corner of the lots. Of course, all the soil testing has been done for this. And you can see these the rectangular boxes here represent the proposed house locations. My cursor right here is the location of the common driveway that we have permitted for the project. And the design of this site will have individual septic tanks and pump chambers for each of the houses, and they will pump separately up to the leaching field, where they'll be joined into the D-box and flow via gravity into a conventional pipe and stone septic system. We have submitted this, of course, to Neshoba. I know Jim's here, so I don't want to speak out of turn, but we did go through a round of comments, revisions a few months back with Jim, based on Jim's review of the site. And I think at that time we also had submitted draft copies of the various legal agreements that are required by Title V for shared septic systems. Those documents include a grant of Title V covenant and easement, which basically establishes that there's a shared septic system on the site. It includes a document that describes the system. Again, all these documents would go on record with the Registry of Deeds. It includes a document that would define the trust and the agreement and the trustees that which would be all the property owners who would be responsible for operating and maintaining the system, and it defines all those various responsibilities. And then we also have an operation and maintenance plan that goes along with that. as well as what's called a financial assurance mechanism or an escrow agreement, which would ensure that the system could be operated and maintained throughout its life. So those documents have been submitted in draft form. The applicant is very close to signing a purchase and sale agreement with a buyer, and anticipates closing in early September. And so the plan for the preparation for the recording of these legal documents that would be done at the time of closing on the land deal. There's quite a few moving parts. Some of those, I'm not an attorney, so I'm speaking a little out of turn here, but some of the documents sort of reference each other. You want to reference, various deeds, deed book and page in those things. So that's the intention, is to record those documents in closing. So I guess I'm here to answer any questions, but the applicant is really anxious to have to receive his septic permit so that the purchase and sale and closing can proceed. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Jim, do you have some info on this, some background, some comments?
So as Greg mentioned, the shared system comes with a whole host of paperwork to define the relationship between all the lots in the homeowners association with regards to the septic system. And so Title V allows the board to approve these systems if that document, if it complies with Title V and that documentation is recorded. I have reviewed the plans as far as compliance with Title V. So all the septic system components, the trenches, the tanks, pitches, and all of that are in compliance. And really what's left is approving of and signing primarily the shared system, the grant of Title V easement document. That's the document that really essentially states that this is going to be a shared system and it shall have the following documents. And as Greg described, the financial mechanism, the homeowners association, defining further the legal relationships between the two. So I don't see an issue with the system as it is. And the grant of Title V easement and covenant is a standard document from DEP. And I don't necessarily see an issue with the board signing that. I assume, and I'm not going to speak for Greg, or Matt, I assume the document, there should be a new draft that now has the new owner's name in it. So when it gets recorded, it can be signed and recorded with the new owner on it. So if all of those, that document, that shared system document the draft was modified with the new owner and signed and recorded at closing, I don't see any issue with the board issuing a septic system permit for the site, because that document, that Title V covenant, defines the other documents that Greg described. And then we can get those documents revised for the new owner, things like the financial mechanism and the homeowners association documents. All of those can then become conditions of the septic system permit.
Okay. Sounds pretty straightforward. We've done this before.
There's at least two in town, correct?
Yeah. Kevin Davis, do you have any questions or comments? Kevin Davis.
You think after 2 years I'd hit the unmute button. So my first question is, we've had a bunch of these shared systems in town where they come in afterwards and want to finish out the basement. Is there a deed restriction on this, with the knowledge that people know how much reserve there is for their house in the septic system? Because if they don't know that going in, we're going to have the same problem we've had on a bunch of them. And I don't want to repeat history again.
I could answer that, Mr. Chair, if it's appropriate.
Please.
Yes, the system is designed for the gallons per day, as it's get 1,700 and change. It accommodates 4 bedrooms houses. That's it. And that will be stipulated in the document. So and that all flows through the chain of title in each of the deeds. So when the deeds are finally conveyed for each of the lots, the deed will reference all of the documents that I just referred to, and those documents will restrict the number of bedrooms. So that will be pretty clear in the chain of title.
Yeah, that restricts the number of bedrooms, but then it restricts the number of rooms in the entire house as well. So when we go through and restrict the number of rooms in the name of the house, that means, you know, like it's going to be what, 9 rooms if I did my math right, Kevin Baker?
Yes.
So that means the houses can't have more than 9 rooms. You've already got 4 bedrooms upstairs. That means you have 5 rooms that you can play with in the remaining part of the house. And I think we need to figure out some way of communicating that to the buyers of the property so that they understand that there is like no way of expanding the basement or finishing the basement. And if they go over that 9-room count or one more, right? Whatever the board thing is, what is it? 10 rooms that we can go to? Cause we always let them +1. Is that what it is, board?
We typically grant to a total of 10 rooms.
Right. So so we need to communicate that somehow. So that way, when the people that buy this house understand that what they're getting into. Does that make sense, everybody? Or am I speaking out of the side of my mouth?
No, I think that makes sense. It being called out as a 4-bedroom home in the documents and the deed that they'll be filing with the registry, I think covers it. And, you know, if there are 9 rooms in the new construction and they come to us a couple years down the road and they want to add 1 room in the basement, they have the right to come before the board and get that 10th room.
I understand, but is there some way that we can communicate that to the people?
Kevin, I hear what you're saying, and I think it's an unfortunate circumstance that, yes, all the paperwork will be legally accurate, but we can never guarantee that a buyer purchasing any property on any septic system will fully comprehend the long-term ramifications of what they're taking. I think that's difficult to expect. I totally understand with what you're saying, and I agree. I think it should be very clear to people, but I don't know how we could accomplish that.
The other question I have is there a lot of fill being added to here, or are we shaving off the top of a hill?
Great question. So there's been a lot of fill taken off the property over the last several years. So there is no fill being added. We're basically reshaping the bottom of that area. It goes the other direction. It's a freaking bathtub. Yes. Yeah.
Sorry.
So the where the houses are low relative to the surrounding side slopes. So these are this area up here is high and then down here is low.
Yeah.
We're just basically
and this system is
actually it's very good sand and gravel in the area, and so the system.
I was going to say this is all sand and gravel. This was the gravel pit and sand pit over on the side.
Correct. Yeah.
So the perk rate on this thing is just lets the water run through to wherever.
Yeah.
Dan Kane, any questions, comments?
Quick question for Jim. Does it look like this is going to require any variances or anything as designed?
No, they meet full compliance with Title V and your regs.
Full compliance. Awesome. I kind of agree with that question. We've seen this before with shared systems adding in rooms. So kind of following up on Kevin's piece, that certainly we have granted waivers to go to 10 rooms for individual homes. I guess my question is, with 4 homes in the system, if we granted additional space times 4, could the system theoretically handle that additional space? So it's designed for 4-bedroom homes. I don't know what your room count is total in these designs, because it's not really specified in the plans that we're seeing. But is the system, I would feel bad for homeowner number 3 or 4 who comes before the board when the first 2 have come through, had them approved, and looking at the numbers now, house number 3 or house number 4 wants to finish their basement or add something, and we say the system can no longer support you because you were basically too slow jumping on your opportunity, because the system now is Nope, nope. The first two are fast enough to get in the system, and it can support it. The system can't support your expansion. Obviously, the deed restriction would be for 4-bedroom. Is it possible to make it a deed restriction of 4-bedroom, 9-room total as part of the, or whatever the design is, but just making that as part of the deed restriction? So that's again that piece. So people are forewarned, forearmed, and are aware that because with the shared system, there is a shared responsibility to your neighbors, your partners in the system, that expansion really isn't, or is less likely being a viable option in this house.
Kevin, I don't know if I try to speak to that, kind of the way practice has been in town.
Yeah, sure.
So I guess if we looked at each one of these houses as having 4 bedrooms in that house, right now the board's generally okay with everybody, or with a person adding an additional room to their house. So in theory, as we look at the building permits for each one of these sites, if somebody's adding 1 room, usually because it'll have a restriction for the 4-bedroom, it's been okay to go to 10 rooms on these houses. I assume, and it happens now, that if somebody comes in and wants to add more than 1 additional room, that automatically goes to the board for your decision. So I don't know if that's enough of a mechanism for the board to say, hey, wait a minute, this is the shared system. Yeah, everybody gets 1 room, because we're concerned that we'll end up compounding the number of rooms in the development.
I don't think we necessarily object to that. The other thing to say here is if they went over that, if someone came in and wanted to add 2 rooms, there is room on the site to add to the leaching field. We're not proposing it now, but they could, a homeowner that wants it bad enough could add a trench to this thing, right here. Or even carve out some more and put it on the uphill side. So a couple trenches could be added to this in the future if there was a homeowner that wanted it bad enough. So it's not that, so limiting, putting language in the deed limiting to 4 bedrooms wouldn't necessarily preclude a future homeowner from doing something. It just might cost them a little bit more money, because they'd have to do some physical modifications to the system, but it could be done. It's not like we're shoehorning this thing in a place that it doesn't have any room for expansion.
Gino Ferraloni, any questions, comments?
My question is, how many people are there in the particular house when it's done?
We don't know that.
Okay, so I figured 4 bedrooms. If they like to add it on another bedroom, they have to come in front of us anyway. In the meantime, put a restriction on 4 bedroom until something else comes out. Could be maybe the sewage might go by that particular area, and then they can have 10 bedroom if they want to. Okay, so right now put a restriction. That's it. If they want to, if they feel like finish the cellar, they might be able to do that, but no bathroom. They can go up if they have to go in the bathroom. Very simple. Use it for enjoyment, but not for bedroom and not for using the bathroom. So you're eliminating something. All depends on how many gallons that the septic system has. They can hold. That's another thing. And the question is, sooner or later, those houses are going to have a help from a sewage treatment.
Matt Wason, any questions, comments?
2 quick things. First, Mr. Roy, right here on this drawing you're showing, is that leach field abutting up that dark solid and double dash line? Is that property? No, to the kind of the northeast. Yeah. Is that property line or is that project line?
The heavy dark line?
Yeah.
That signifies the limit of our proposed work for this project. So
okay. So property's further out. So this leach field's not actually approaching any property line.
Oh no, right. So can you see this 83 feet and 116? Those are the closest points we are to the property's way back here.
Okay.
And also quite a bit lower than the surrounding properties. So.
Okay. And then this is probably a question more for Jim, and I don't know if it's too off target. You can say it is. How is the financial amount determined for escrow? And the only reason I ask is because we're kind of living in times where services are getting pretty expensive pretty quickly. And how is that designed to make sure with a new project like this, the group is actually putting enough money away for the future?
So we need to take a look at the financial mechanism that they're proposing. So generally what we do is get a figure for the cost of the system. And then they kind of portion that over 10 years and put 1/10 in each year until they get to the total amount. The documents that I've seen also address the fact that if they find that it's underfunded, they'll need to make up the difference at time of replacement.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
All right.
I
Go
have a
ahead.
final follow-up if you don't.
Yep. Go ahead, Kev.
What are we doing for the leaching field to make sure that the future property owners don't use or put anything over top of it? What kind of visual barrier are we doing?
We don't have anything proposed. I mean, it would be monumented, of course, on as-built plans and things, but does the board have a policy for that, or?
I mean, Jim, typically if it's a different type of system, if it's a geomat or something more sensitive to having something on top of it, I believe there's a mechanism in place for that. But for a conventional stone and pipe with trenches.
Yeah, so all the driveways to the house are far enough away from that so that the system, the leaching area and the tanks aren't subject to traffic. So I assume it's just going to be a spot that is either it's loamed and seeded or left to go wildflowers or however they want to finish it. I think that dark line that they were referring to, that's kind of the edge of the easement that defines the legal responsibilities for the system so that they can access that piece of property. Because I think that, correct me if I'm wrong, Greg, I think that where the leaching area is part of one of the lots in the development. And
Correct.
so,
Yep.
by that dark line in the grant of Title V covenant and easement defines that area as an area that, you know, whoever needs to fix the system can access to fix the system. So,
Yeah.
So
And sorry.
go ahead, I'm sorry.
Our plans definitely address that there should be no permanent structures over the system. I think we have a standard note in our plans, and I think that the legal documents, honestly, they may address that directly, but they definitely refer to our plan. So I think it would flow through the that would be a prohibited. You're not supposed to put a shed over the top of a leaching system. You can put it right off of it, but you can't put it on top, right?
So could we put a deed restriction in the property that contains the leaching field to say that that nothing can be built on top of the leaching field in reference to the plans?
Yeah, I mean, that's the law anyway, so we don't object to that. We can make sure there's language in there for that.
That could be included in either the deed for the property or in the homeowner's trust, which should define, along with the other documents, the rights and responsibilities of that shared system.
Can we put it in both places so that the deed of the property owner that actually has it on their property knows about it, and then also have it inside of the homeowner's document or homeowners association's document?
I don't think that has an issue doing that. I mean,
Yeah, but I understand the point. Probably makes sense. So I think we'd be happy to accept that as a condition if that's what the board chooses.
All right. So I think this is just a discussion, but I think we've come away with the fact that we'd like that protection described in the documents, along with, whatever verbiage you can include regarding the number of rooms, not to exceed. And then if they need to come before us for a variance down the road, that's what they'll do, and we'll grant it or not. So, was there anything else you wanted to get out of this discussion?
Just when can we expect to have a permit? That's kind of one of the things that is. I don't want to put it all on your board, but they need to have the permit in place before they can close on the property. So they're anxious to get that. And then of course, once they have the permit, they can enclose, they can finalize all these documents and record them. So, does the board have a thought on when we could see that?
So Kevin, I can at least speak to what I think needs to happen for that.
Sure.
So for me to kind of put the permit together, as I would normally for you, that grant needs to be signed by the board. So once that's drafted, I don't know if it can be drafted and Brenda can have it at the office. If you wanted to stop in and sign it, it's really up to the board. And then, as Greg mentioned, that grant is a standard DEP document, which defines all of the relationships, including things like the financial mechanism. Then we can, then a permit can be issued and the conditions that you want can be included in that permit.
Yep. So we have the document all ready to go. We just have to, you can see here, kind of fill in some dates and things when it's finally executed. So we can get that into the hands of, get that to the office very quickly.
Yeah, sure. I don't see why we couldn't get it all signed by at least a quorum of board members within the week, probably by Monday, if everyone's around and not on vacation. I can sign it on Monday.
Okay.
Jim, will there just be some sort of confirmation or verification that the documents say what we think they're going to say before we?
I was going to say to Greg, if you could send that over to me.
Yep.
With all the new information for new owners, that would be helpful. Then it's kind of recorded once and done kind of thing.
Okay.
All right.
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Since this is a board taking an action that we are signing off on, does this need to be a public hearing? Does this need to be? I'm simply not sure, but as opposed to a standard permit, which is on behalf of the board by our agent, this is actually a board taking action on this paperwork and approving it. Does this need to be a public hearing?
That's a good question. Jim, what are your thoughts on that?
It's on the agenda. It's the agenda was posted. People have the opportunity to comment and attend. The way Title V kind of words shared systems, it says the board may approve. So my thought is it's notified at a public meeting, an action that you're taking. I don't see where it's out of order.
Yeah, I mean, I'm okay with approving. There's nothing really for us to approve. We've signed these documents before. Really, it's the technical Title V aspect of things that Jim is looking at and basically signing for us. So.
Yeah, I just, if I could put my 2 cents in, we've done several of these, and not only, I don't know if we've done one in Littleton, but we've done a bunch in surrounding communities, and I don't think there's no mechanism. Unlike, we're not requesting any variances in the shared system. The shared system portions of Title V don't require the scheduling or holding of a public hearing. So I think you're on good standing.
Okay. All right. You okay with that, Dan?
I've got concerns, but it's okay.
Okay. I mean, are we taking a vote? Because I mean, it was just a discussion, so I don't know if there's a vote on this.
We asked for language in the deed restrictions, and we all have to sign, so it's board action, I would think. I'm just asking the question. I'm not trying to slow this down or stop them or interfere with the petitioner. I just want to make sure we're above board and following best practice.
So the document that for the shared system is kind of a standard DEP document, which essentially the board states they approve of the shared system. With the permits will be the conditions for financial mechanisms and the restrictive covenants that go on the deeds and the homeowners association. Those will all be components of approval for a certificate of compliance with the septic system. I don't know if that matters or if that's what it was that you were looking for.
Maybe perhaps Jim, if I could, do these shared systems normally come to the board for signing with that when there are no variances or changes?
I generally do so that you know what's going on, since they're not just a kind of straightforward individual single family home.
Yeah, and then the document does require the Board of Health signatures on it,
Yep.
as Jim suggested. So, typically we would do something like this, but it's sort of a one extra step, I guess, because it requires your signature on a document other than the septic permit. So that's pretty standard. I don't know that you need a vote. We won't object if you want to take one.
Yeah,
But,
I don't think.
I don't know that you need it, but it's up to you.
Yeah, I don't think we need to take a vote. I just think that when all the paperwork comes in and it gets looked over and it's confirmed and verified that everything's there that needs to be there, that's when board members sign.
Yep. And we'll get it transmitted over to Jim so we can put some final set of eyes on it, and then we'll once we get the all clear from Jim, we'll get it right into the board so you can get it signed and the permit issued. We'd appreciate that very much.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for your time tonight.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay. Have a good night.
Good luck.
All right. So we are running a little behind here, but we have a continued public hearing now for potential regulation regarding treatment for SDS within 100 feet of wetlands. Potential motion to adopt a local regulation, quote, all SDS within 100 feet of bank or bordering vegetated wetland BVW defined by 310 CMR 10.54 and 10.55 shall treat domestic wastewater to secondary treatment standards as described in section 310 CMR 15.202 of Title 5. There were two documents put into the packet. I hope everybody had a chance to read over them, just describing the bank or bordering vegetated wetland and the secondary treatment standards. So I will go ahead and ask for questions or comments on this, starting with Kevin Davis.
Can you guys come back to me on this one, please? Thank you.
Okay. Dan Kane, questions, comments?
The DEP regs are, I was going to say, are pretty straightforward, but they're really not very straightforward. They've obviously reviewed them pretty effectively. The piece for us
Questions, comments?
Yeah, I was wondering why we play around with the regulation. So far, we're doing so well. And also, what about asking Jimmy his advice?
Yeah, certainly. We'll ask Jim on this, and we've talked about this. This all stems from that one public hearing we had on Maplehurst, where there was some gray area, and the applicant was contesting Jim's recommendation and Jim's advice because there were other circumstances, other properties which had different geographical features and locations and groundwater issues that made them different. Yet they were unwilling to apply Jim's advice and recommendations to this property, and having a regulation that is clearly stated will help us eliminate any gray area in the future. It doesn't mean we can't grant a variance. It just means that we have a leg to stand on when we're talking to folks.
Okay, what I'm saying, I want to make sure we don't restrict other people trying to find a place and build a house you know what I mean, by changing the regulations. So the regulations should be mediocre. You know, like if 100 feet away from the well, or 100 feet away from the wall, for something like that. You know, you can get adjusted later on. You know, but you got to be very sensitive. I mean, a lot of people, they understand how much they can go through, and some people wants to build something, they have an engineer and everything, and most 90%, 95%, the engineer will not try to out, you know what I mean, out you and the board. But as long as regulations are stable.
Matt Wason, questions, comments?
Yeah, I think it's just for me not being a perfect expert at the requirements. So out of 15202, it's section 4 that lists these all of these criteria that an equivalent alternative technology shall meet. And I would just have to, I guess, say, you know, Jim, are these the right criteria that a system should meet in this situation? And if so, great, it's all written down and we can point to it.
That's a great segue to Jim. Jim, could you give us your input on this?
Sure. So those treatment criteria are designed for areas of particular concern. So if you're in a zone 2, they want you to clean up the wastewater a little bit. Whether it's appropriate for all systems within 100 feet of wetlands, here's kind of my thoughts. Title 5 states that septic system, the edge of leaching field, can be 50 feet from wetlands, as does your regulations. It's your current regulation. So my thought is it's going to generate lots and lots of variance requests to start with. And effectively what you've done is double the distance that you're requiring people to have their leaching fields from wetlands by saying you got to treat it otherwise. Because as you can see with that case that we had down on whatever the road was, people are somewhat resistant to doing treatment if they don't have to. And so if they're pointing to the fact that Title 5 is 50 feet and your town regs are 50 feet, that might be a hard sell. Yeah, and there's a section of Title 5 that essentially states that, you know, meeting the minimum requirements within Title 5 are considered generally protective of the public health and safety. They do allow boards to make regulations above and beyond, so that's why you have the ability to do that. But generally what you're trying to do is when you're making those regulations, you kind of define why it is that you feel that there's something unique about your community or unique about the situations that you're trying to adopt regulations for when you do that. And a lot of times that's so that it stands up if ever you get challenged in court. I guess my thoughts are, as people design septic systems and they start asking for more and more reductions and more and more relief, that's when you start looking at, well, what else can you do so that a board can say, from a public health standpoint, they're asking for a 2-foot reduction, they're asking for a shorter distance to a foundation, they're asking for a shorter distance to wetlands. What can we do as a board to have them mitigate potential for a public health issue? And so that's, as I was looking at that site in particular and sites similar, when you start compounding the number or start adding the number of variances, my thought is clean up the wastewater a bit. Then a board can say, hey, look at, we granted the variance, but here's why. We require the applicant to make the wastewater cleaner. So that's kind of how I come at that.
So just to clarify, so this section 4 of 15202, is that well defining the criteria for which we would want that system treating the outflow to?
So those treatment tank systems, I think, can treat to the standards that are in that regulation. So that's something you can point to in the regulation, say, here are standards when you're in an area of concern or an area that you believe needs additional treatment. These are this is the additional treatment we'd like to see, and that's what the state defines.
Great. And I feel that's what I hear what you're saying. And exactly, I think we just want to be able to point to something because
right.
People want to make changes, but we also have a larger community to kind of look out for. So
right.
I'm good with it with that piece, Kevin.
Okay. Kevin Davis, I'm just circling back to you.
Yep. Thank you so much for circling back. The concern I have is what about systems that already exist within the 100 foot that aren't doing secondary treatment? what types of things are we, so if they go in and like if the system fails and we have to go and they want to use the alternate locations of a currently existing system to put new pipes in and things like that, and they're within this 100-foot area, but they've used a traditional system all along, what kind of, are they going to have to ask for a variance then? Is that the intent?
On a repair?
No, I'm not, like the leach field has failed and they want to go to the next door, the backup leach field area, right? Which means putting in new pipe and things like that. Are they going to have to come before the board and ask for a variance then?
I believe if it's within 100 feet of the wetlands and they're not already including secondary treatment, then if they would like to request a variance to not have secondary treatment, then yes, they would have to come before the board.
Okay, so on an existing property that already has this, they're going to have to come in and ask for a special variance on.
Only if the system fails. I mean, they're grandfathered in with the current system they have, and there'll be no change.
Right. Yeah, that was kind of my question. Okay.
Yeah. So we have talked about this for a few weeks now. I don't know if anyone on the board is at this point up to making a motion, or if you would like to continue or just table this for later. I'll leave it up to board members.
Question, Kevin. Is it true that the regs for Littleton used to be 100 feet?
Yes.
That's what I thought.
And that was pulled back in 2006?
I thought it was 2010 or 11.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it was a ways off.
Yeah, over 10 years ago. I mean, my thoughts are, an extra layer of protection doesn't hurt. It's a regulation that folks are more than welcome to come before the board and request a variance to. My concern about not putting something like this in place is that we end up in a situation down the road where we don't have someone as wise as Jim on our side who knows the landscape and the geography and the territory to recommend such a thing to someone, and it goes unnoticed or overlooked. Or maybe the recommendation does get made, but they don't have to take that recommendation because there's nothing in black and white. And there's been other cases that sort of set precedent that would allow them to not take a recommendation. And if a board ever did want to try and enforce that recommendation, there's just no leg to stand on. And it's a lawsuit if they do.
So I'll throw out that we have kind of paired two things together. One is, as we discussed, giving ourselves some protection, something to point to for when we do need to deal with the system that's within whatever the range is that we've decided upon. And I think that's an important piece. At the same time, we've actually changed the range as well from 50 to 100 feet. So I would throw out that we could do this same language and keep the 50 feet, but add the requirements about treatment, because I think that's where we really got into trouble, where somebody said they only wanted us to approve the variance of the range without anything extra, and we didn't have anything to point to. I throw that out there. However, I am in favor of the 100 foot. If anybody has a discussion, otherwise I will make a motion.
I think, getting to your point, Matt, real quick, sorry. I think it's pretty clear that if you're within 100 feet, you need to treat the wastewater to secondary treatment standards. So I don't think we're moving out the 100 foot. I think we're saying if you're within that 100 foot area, you have to then treat to that standard.
Right. I'm saying right now, all we have is you can't do it within 50 feet.
Oh, you're saying
of secondary treatment. So then we have to give a variance for the 50 feet. And then when we say we want some secondary treatment, it says, why? We're just asking for a variance of the 50 feet. So I love that we're putting some language together. I think we could talk about the range, but as I said, I'm also happy to put a motion forward, and I can if you want me to do that first.
Yeah, why don't you put forward a motion and we'll try and move things along.
Very well. I make a motion that we adopt this local regulation as stated in the agenda. All STS within 100 feet of a bank or bordering vegetated wetland, EDW, defined by 310 CMR 1054 and 1055, shall treat domestic wastewater to secondary treatment standards as described in section 310 CMR 15.202 of Title 5.
Kevin, can I just one point of kind of the statutory requirements? So any regulations made above and beyond Title V, you have to have, this actually requires a public hearing, and it requires that you notify the public 14 days out and then 7 days out of the meeting so the public can actually be involved. So if you want to kind of formulate what you'd like to present at a meeting and then do the notifications, boards are allowed to make regulations because so many boards use Title V, use their septic system regulations as zoning rules back in the 80s and early 90s. The state changed the law that allows board to make regulations to kind of carve out when you make regulations above and beyond Title V. There's a specific process in there.
Is that publication in a newspaper?
Yes.
Okay. And is that the only means of notice?
I'd have to look at it, but that's because it's so old, probably.
Okay.
I will adjust my motion to say all of the prior is our proposal to post to the public to hold a formal public hearing to adopt.
Yeah, certainly if you wanted to kind of come up with something you'd like to then present, then the next step would be is put it on an agenda and make sure you have the time frames in place and then move it forward.
Okay, could you say that one more time? So publish it, does it have to be published for 3 weeks in a row?
So 2 weeks before the hearing, then a week before the hearing.
Okay.
And then you'd hold the hearing, and then the public has been notified for a couple of weeks of the upcoming hearing. And they can then, if they want to come and, again, it was what the state decided to throw in there to kind of make sure boards, I don't know. Again, I'm sure there's some politics to it because there were a lot of regulations that were being made as de facto zoning.
We have time to do that before our next meeting on the 14th.
Okay, great.
Okay.
So I'll make a motion to continue, and we'll revisit this on September 14th.
I mean, if you wanted to kind of get the language tightened up to where you could just present it,
Right.
that would certainly save you the time at that meeting. Then you can present it to the public the way you'd like it.
Okay, does anyone have an
I
issue
think
with
we're
that?
doing good. You made the motion?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, did you make the motion?
Motion to continue to September
Okay,
14th.
I second.
All right,
Continue.
roll
Right.
call vote. Kevin Davis,
Kevin Davis, yes.
Dan Kane,
And Kane, yes.
Gino Ferraloni,
Yes, Gino,
And-
Verloni, yes.
Matt Wason,
Matt Wason, yes.
and Kevin Baker votes yes. So moving on, the ID decision support tool. Matt Wason, do you have any updates on that? Oh, beautiful.
Okay, so here's the latest data. Not a lot has changed really. We are still looking at the vast majority of Omicron BA5, and then BA4, 6, and 4 are just small percentages that are out there. The dashboard's the same. We have a lot of yellow. You can see our 2-week case counts continue to kind of bounce up and bounce down. Always with the caveat that people are doing home testing. I would say just anecdotally, BA5 is causing more symptomatic illness in people, even those who are vaccinated. And just like other variants that we've seen, the at-home tests are unfortunately just not very predictably accurate. Here, lots of people who are symptomatic and testing negative for days before they actually get a positive test. So I know it makes it really hard to follow guidelines and recommendations from the CDC when it can be actually unclear as to when you're positive, when you're contagious, etc. Obviously, we have our school meeting coming up tomorrow to talk about further data. And then when it comes to wastewater, I actually had not realized that Massachusetts Department of Public Health is posting wastewater data from a variety of different sources now. Many places around the state, none that are particularly helpful to us. But I think the problem with the data is that it is all over the place. So our numbers, we've been pulling from the MWRA source, which are in Boston. They've been hovering around, 400 to 600 for at least a few weeks. But some of the other sites around the state are seeing numbers that are in the over 2,000. So I think it becomes a difficult trend to watch. At least the Boston numbers seem to be kind of volume that I think the curves are not too wild. But as to how well this data correlates with what we're going to experience in the community, that remains a question. I don't know if we'll get a clear answer to that in the near future. That's all I had for COVID on the dashboard. I don't have a dashboard, but I'll also bring up that monkeypox numbers we're continuing to see in the state, about 40 or so cases identified each week. So once again, we'll repeat that monkeypox is out there. It's not necessarily producing all the symptoms you would normally read about, but if you are concerned or a person at risk, please pay attention to any symptoms you might be having. And definitely if you have a rash, make sure you see your provider as quickly as possible. Vaccinations are somewhat available, but they're limited. And so you have to meet criteria in order to get those. And that information is all available on the Massachusetts DPH site. Any questions?
So getting back to the wastewater treatment plant data, some of the problems that you're going to have with the wastewater treatment plant data is there's two main ways of going out and looking at the wastewater treatment plant data, or two companies that do the analysis, or maybe three that I've seen. And from the people that I've talked with, that there's going to be a problem because the way that they analyze it is going to be off. So like if you look at the MWRA stuff versus the Worcester stuff, for example, they're not the same and they're going to be off how they do it. I asked a local DPH person if there was a way that we could normalize some of this data. And that was something that the person said that they were actually looking at to try to figure out how to normalize it. So that way it'd be comparable between the systems. But they just like you presented, Matt, they think it's going to be one of those insurmountable hills unless you're using the exact same test, blah, 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 blah.
Well, I didn't realize because the data they post say that samples are taken and all analyzed by the same company, by BioBot.
Okay, then what I was reading was off, but there's a couple of different companies that do it. So
okay, I can show this real quick just so people.
Yeah. If they're done by BioBot, then we should be able to normalize the data then to try to get it to the same thing. So that's fine.
So here's the new report that they're putting out. So many different treatment plants. Obviously, some are one small area and others are much larger areas. So the ones we've been reporting up until this point have been these two groupings, the MWRA. So you can see the communities that are included there. And then here are their charts. So that MWRA, there's south right there. North Shore in Boston, and there's north. But you see those orange and pink lines are some of the most stable data, which is what I would much rather see if I were trying to predict community impact, as opposed to whatever is going on in Provincetown, where their numbers are skyrocketing. So I'll keep looking at this, but I think for this point, I would propose we kind of just continue to monitor mostly the NWRA because it seems to be the most stable data.
So that's kind of like when you want to compare to the Upper Blackstone type wastewater treatment plant, which is one that's going to be, closer.
Red.
Yeah, that's the red one, which for me is always fun to find. So that's, that one's going to be kind of interesting to look at for us because that's kind of to the south of us and some of the other places that we draw from. So anyway, the other thing about this wastewater treatment plant, I reached out, I haven't heard back from anybody yet on if we can include that in our wastewater treatment plant, our smart sewer, or whatever we're calling it for the town of Littleton. I think that's something that we should definitely be able to include in that. So that's something, a recommendation that we should definitely have with the town to try to go figure out how to incorporate that into there. So I don't know how the rest of the board feels about that. But yeah, that's my 3 cents.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea if we can get that incorporated. Did you have a conversation with Nick Lawler about that, Kevin?
So I've sent an email out to Nick and I haven't heard anything back. So I'll try making a phone call to Nick Lawler and see if I can get somewhere.
I'll be curious to see if part of the reason these charts are so bouncy is just because you end up with small populations, and is that helping drive your copies way up? Because I absolutely want to explore what you're talking about, but is it something where it becomes a couple people are positive and they throw off the whole town's wastewater data? I just don't know what it'll look like.
Well, I mean, look at Grafton. I mean, how big is Grafton? Does anybody know how big Grafton is? I can look it up. I don't think Grafton's that big. I could be insulting Grafton, but I don't know the population. It goes, okay, town of Grafton has 19,664 people. It's about it's about double the size of Littleton, right? And so, you know, I don't know how much Athol has in it. Let's see how many population in Athol, Massachusetts. Athol, Mass is actually a closer one to us, right? So the interesting thing though is that all the numbers are normalized per copies per milliliter over on the side. So, you know, I think that's probably pretty accurate as far as, you know, hey, there's something going on that's in there that you really need to worry about in the population. And I think then what you need to do is see how that correlates to some of the other data, like testing data that comes in, because that's the only way you're going to be able to kind of get those two numbers to kind of say, because we have that feel for the wastewater treatment plants in Boston, right? We know what it kind of looks like, oh my goodness, we had a large spike here and look, we can overlay it. That would be the same kind of thing that you would want to overlay, would be the number of case counts in Athol to see how that number correlates to the rise and, you know, all that kind of good stuff. So I think that's where the unfamiliarity comes in, Matt.
Yeah. So we'll keep investigating this, see what we can find.
All right. Thank you, guys. Let's see. Next we have, just a quick discussion on health department long-term goals. I was hoping we could pin down a date for a retreat.
Actually, sorry, Kevin, before we get there, the next piece was going to be the our slide presentation. Are we going to talk about that? Our public health response guide.
Did we lose Mr. Baker?
I guess I can answer my own question then. I'm in charge. Very well. It is on the agenda as a sub-bullet under the ID's decision support tool was the public health crisis response guide. Points to whoever comes up with a better acronym for this. So one sec. So this document was sent out some weeks ago, but it was, I think it was about a month ago. And then I know at least Kevin Baker brought it to the select board. Was anybody else there? Okay. I know I wasn't, I was out of town. So it was a discussion topic to just say, how can we kind of document out a little bit more of a plan for when something happens? What are we going to do, and what can we expect assistance from the select board and whatever it might be. It's to help us as well as a board or the changes members periodically. What can we kind of write down that's a guide? So what I call out here is, as I say, number one, this is not a protocol or a procedure. It's just a guide. What can we kind of grab and pick up and go, okay, here are some recommendations to start with. Ideally, like the decision support tool, we want this to be a changing document, a growing document that will help us over time. And when we can learn from it, let's update it. So this kind of, I came up with this is room for discussion, but we also wanted to talk to the school board about this as well to see what kind of input they may have, or if they want to take ideas from it to create their own kind of system. So 5 actual levels, 0 being normal, and then we go from monitoring to major impact, depending on kind of this, whatever public health crisis is out there and impacting us. And so then each one is broken down kind of, well, what is the public health crisis? So obviously at 0, we don't hopefully have any public health crisis. Our operations are basically normal. We're not really doing any actions except looking to the future and making sure that we're monitoring our stockpiles, making sure things don't get old, and making sure we're prepared for something that might happen. And then a communications piece on each of these that are what are we communicating and to who and how. So level 1 then becomes what I call monitoring. So this is something's on our radar. Perhaps it's in the United States, maybe it's not, maybe it's somewhere else in the world, but we're starting to worry about it. So ideally, we don't really anticipate a big impact. So we're keeping an eye on it, but we're not setting anything on fire. So the Board of Health is still meeting regularly. However, we start to add the agenda items saying, let's make sure we're talking about this topic every single time. Every single time something's up, we're going to be talking about it, review data so that people know that we're paying attention to it. Actions here start to say, okay, we're going to post stuff to the web page, make sure people know about what this is. And so that kind of, in my mind, is probably the extent of the communications using the website and using our meetings to help communicate that this is happening. Coming to level 2, this is now, we do have an impact on our community. We'll call it minor. Don't ask me how we measure that exactly. I think that's exactly one of the things that we have to deal with as a board when something happens. We have to kind of say, well, is this a minor impact, moderate, major? We can use that decision support tool as well, but it's the data that's going to be fed to us. So this is something that is sincere, something that's impacting our community. We're probably still meeting on a normal frequency. We still have a standing agenda item, but now we're potentially talking about making public advisories. We're meeting to have a vote to say we're advising the public to do X. At this point, I think we have to expand it so that we're communicating via the website, social media, which I almost say tongue in cheek because I don't think our Board of Health has social media. Okay. To be determined. And then I would like to see at least the townwide email to people who are signed up for the Littleton email list, some information that can go out so that we're pushing a little bit more, not just waiting for people to come to one of our sources of information. I think that potentially has been a gap that we've had in the past. How can we make sure we're actually being a little more proactive earlier on with things? We don't want surprises. Level 3, it becomes moderate. Again, don't ask me how we measure this, but something is happening that's worse. Here, we're now moving past advisories to say we're probably going to vote and impose on orders. What I call out here is this is where we kind of start to say, well, ideally, we're working in hand with the select board. Not that we legally have to or not, but it would just be, it's far better for our community and for the folks living here that we're doing things together as select board. So this was part of why I raised the question of should we be holding our meetings more close to prior to the select board so that if we do need to come together quickly, we have that capability to do so. And here potentially the actions also include restrictions that are imposed on municipal buildings or public spaces. Same level of communication. There's also print. I didn't add in every single possible piece of communication. I think we should also build that out with feedback from everybody else. But again, we're for sure, I think at this point we need to be pushing more communication out to people. love to see more signage if we're producing some signage and distributing it so that if there are places that are closed or not, we can help businesses post that information. And then level 4 becomes something is pretty major. Now we're probably talking about more restrictions. We're probably talking about emergency meetings. Oh, sorry, I probably didn't call it on the moderate. On the moderate, we're still probably meeting normal, but maybe it increased. I know at the peak of COVID, there were increased frequency of meetings, so I think it depends. But I would say if you define something as major, we should be meeting on a more regular basis, every week, probably, if something is this bad. We have more restrictions. And here, what I added to communications is actually leveraging Code Red as another option, because in this case, I think we're probably going to want to be putting information out much faster to people so that they can understand exactly what's going on at a time. And then just kind of some other ideas that we have to think about as we use some sort of tool like this. As I already said, how do we determine our crisis level? We got to work through that. Second, we are going to have a health agent someday. I think they should be built into this plan so that they're actually either following it or have maybe actual policies and procedures to follow. If we say, we need to flip this switch, here's what now our health agent is expected to do. And then obviously, as we already discussed, and it's going to move forward, I don't see an end to having problems with the availability of really helpful data for our community to help us make decisions. For me, that means I'm probably going to leave more conservatively as things go, just because I'm going to worry about the data we're not seeing, or that the data is not giving us a full picture. So that's just the package we kind of put together. I think we should also kind of discuss it and figure out if it's something we kind of want to keep chipping away at and potentially post so that we just have something that helps guide us. And as I said, Kevin wanted to discuss it with the school board tomorrow night as well. And Kevin texted me and said he has technical difficulties, and we're going to finish with that. So, Dan, yes.
I was at the select board meeting with Kevin when he kind of presented the highlights of this. In principle, they were on board with having some kind of a standardized approach to, any public health crisis or incident, kind of that generic, how do we handle whatever may come down the pike. In general, they were, supportive in principle. We didn't get obviously into any real meaningful details of how best to work together, authorities, overlaps, other than simply recognizing that it is always better when we all work in the same sandbox and have the same message across the board. We did talk a little bit about how can we standardize communications, a big piece of what you had of website, social media, reverse 911, Code Red, all those pieces that are in effect the programmable signs around town. We have a lot of communication tools that when we were looking at COVID, and we'll use the example of the mask mandate, that there was a perceived delay, perhaps, in utilizing some of those communication tools that are available to the community in sharing that message across as broad an audience as possible. The meeting was actually the same day, the day after the drought warning alert went out. And, the example we used, that within 15 minutes, I had an email that there was a change on an email from the water department, an email from the town, and a reverse 911, all within 15 minutes of each other, relatively early in the morning. So that kind of widespread, immediate response, getting the message out as quickly as possible to as many people as possible, is an awesome, incredible, powerful tool that we didn't see leveraged as quickly and efficiently as it was for the drought when it came to the mask mandate, for example. So we had brought up to them is that perhaps this is something from, the town administrator's office, from the select board, of coming up with some standard, consistent criteria of how to utilize those tools, so that it's not which each one generates a discussion, Sometimes there'll be discussions of how do we best do it, but have some way of having a board with a wider responsibility, a community-wide immediate responsibility, such as the fire department or the water department or electrical department or the board of health, where you're trying to reach a large number of people very, very quickly that may be able to press their button and say, we need this now. And then for things that may not be as critical, have a discussion, or for the smaller population communities that might be able to utilize a more traditional discussion tool, or of do we trigger the broad network or not? And they seemed receptive to having some standardized, or at least protocol algorithm of yes or no, and how quickly do we press all the buttons to reach our community. So they seemed actually relatively receptive to that. I do not know if there's been any progress or if Kevin's heard anything back from that. Because again, that's bigger than just a board of health. We just happen to be the ones bringing it forward. So I would love to see as we get closer with something a little bit more concrete, that perhaps we can share it with the select board, with Chief Connor as the emergency management director for the community. Some of the players who really have, and certainly once we have our health agent, the folks who are really going to be implementing something like this relatively quickly and short term.
Thank you, Dan. Kevin?
So I want to make sure that there are some clear lines of responsibilities that eventually this document contains inside of it. As Dan just mentioned, there are multiple players, but legally the Board of Health has some very concrete rules and triggers that it can pull. So I want to make sure that those lines are very clear. And I want to make sure that there are as few interruptions from other boards as possible with those. Like when we want to put out an order, we don't need to get Mother May I permission from 10 other people. While I agree we need to be working with everybody as possible, I don't believe there's legal standing for anybody to interfere with. So I want to make sure that we're still able to execute as a board and not, how shall we say, called into the corner by a couple of people who think that they have power over the particular Board of Health, when in my opinion, I don't think they do. So I just want to make sure that that's somewhere, that's a bullet that we're going to actually go off and make sure that we understand that. Because when push came to shove, there was a lot of people saying, oh, you can't do that, or you can't do that, you can't do this. And, there was a lot of stuff going on because we haven't dealt with a pandemic in a number of years. But yeah, I'm going to make sure that that's at least documented somewhere.
Bird, I agree. Gino?
I understand what you guys saying. The question is, I hope we won't have another one, COVID-19, but you never know. The question is, we have to be careful. And that's our responsibility.
Thank you, Gina. Yeah, I agree. We obviously love to make something like this and never have to use it or never have to look at it again. That's the best thing to have.
Yeah.
But it becomes that playbook that when something happens, you can pull it out so that at the very least you have some guidance to frame what steps you should be taking. Ideally, not to miss anything. I agree, Kevin. Responsibility. We'd love to document the responsibility. I think that'd be kind of a next level. This is just the highlights, and to say, once you get to a deeper piece, especially with the health agent on board, I think that's where you'd really flesh out, okay, what are the actual steps that might happen?
Yeah, and that also goes back to the emergency preparedness document that we talked about, like how do we handle an actual emergency? There was that document as well. I think how does that document also influence this, and how does that play with it? Personally, presenting this to the school board tomorrow, I have no problem presenting it as, hey, look, this is what we're working on. We'll certainly talk with you, but I don't know the impact that we're going to have with that board as well.
So far, we're doing okay. The question is, you never know. Sometime we might even have something even worse than we had before. So we have to react immediately in order to protect the public. I hope nothing like that will happen again.
Also, Jim, I mean, if there are any resources that you've seen other towns make or that you guys have kind of leaned on, any other historical information before we recreate a lot of wheels here, please send them our way, just if they're idea sources. If nothing further on that, then we have our administrative matters. First on the list are minutes.
1 second before we get to minutes.
Yeah.
I think point of order, Vice Chairman, is that we skipped the Health Department long-term goals.
Oh, sorry.
Okay.
Discussion, Health Department long-term goals. Kevin wants to set a date for Board of Health retreat. Not sure how long he wants that to be or what he's looking for. So I'll ask him to follow up with Brenda to get some inquiry out to us.
And I would say use technology like a doodle poll, or if town is using a Microsoft Teams, that we talk about getting a poll up on the Microsoft Teams site for IT to send out.
Okay. Next, he has listed the public health needs assessment. We've talked previously more than once about the general feeling that we would love to get a needs assessment done sooner rather than later on our public health needs, to help us build out the health agent position and their priorities for the foreseeable future. I know he was exploring some potential options for that. I don't know if he has any further update on that. Has anybody else heard anything?
No?
I have not. Jim, have any of the other communities you serve done a community health assessment in the last 5 years or so? And kind of what have they done it in-house? Have they used, one of the UMass system schools or somebody else or a commercial agency to have you seen anything?
So the hospital systems are required to do these from time to time. So Stewart on this side here, and then probably Emerson for Littleton. I've seen the Neshoba Valley hospital system. I mean, it's catchment wide. It's not community wide. One of the things we're looking to do, Neshoba, is one of the federal grants that we got, because it started so late, had extra money at the end. So we asked them to be able to, and we're working on a job description now to try to get an EPI to do a community health needs assessment for the district in the next year, get it done in the next year. So as soon as we get that position out, we're looking to have that done for the district, because we don't have something specific for the district. And if we have this availability of funds, we'd like to try to use it to be able to do the same thing you're describing. Try to get a sense of what our needs are, what our populations are that have those needs, and try to build off of that.
Great. If folks want, I can try to put together basically kind of an overview of what a public health or community health assessment looks like. Some styles of assessment tools, criteria for, there's lots of different ways of doing it. And is it problem-based? Hey, we think we have a problem with, let's find out if that's really a problem and how we can fix it, or just a generic, what's our status? Where are we? What's our population looks like? Those kind of pieces. But I'm happy to try to put together kind of an overview of community health assessment in general, some tools of how they do it, and see if I can come up with some resources for what would be involved to do it, whether we try doing it in-house or using somebody outside to help support it.
That would be much appreciated, Ian. Any further discussion on long-term goals?
Thank you.
Administrative matters. Minutes. Any update on minutes?
I actually stopped by and introduced myself to our new admin, Brenda, and said if she needs any help typing up said minutes to let me know. I've turned over all of the minutes that I took so that way she can type them up and get them up and going. She said she's working on it diligently and she will get some to us soon.
Sounds good.
Okay. No problem.
COVID-19 test distribution update. I don't have an update on that. I know we were getting the tests out. Jim, I think at the last meeting, there was a question as to what quantities we actually received of that. Were there more boxes that we were still waiting for?
I talked to Kevin today. I don't know if he miscounted or misunderstood, but all the boxes went there. So I think there was 21 boxes total that went to the town. There are currently 18 in the basement as of yesterday. I just went and checked, and I kind of followed up with Kevin today saying, I think you got everything you needed. Again, it's one of these things where a lot of moving parts.
Yes.
And I think some of the boxes are maybe already allocated, and I think maybe Brenda has a list of what's gone where.
Well, I think I heard 11 when we were there a couple weeks ago. I think that was the confusion. So
Okay.
perhaps there were only 11 at that particular room or at that time. So good. 21, I think that is more in line with what I remember hearing originally.
And they're in, so when you walk into the land use office area, the offices now are off to the left. There's some
Yeah.
storage areas in the back, and that's where they're being stored.
Right. And I believe we have them all labeled, and so they're ready to distribute out.
Just other question. What are our plans for those?
So an email is or did go out to the town departments twofold. Number one, asking if departments would like to have a bank of tests for their own internal needs, for example, employees or staff members, whoever it might be, and how many they might request. We're going to try to keep a net on things so that we at least know who's using what so that we can make more intelligent requests in the future for quantities. So that was the first component. And then the second component was, departments that might be interested in having some available to distribute to the public. And then we know that the police agreed to be a 24/7 distribution location. I don't know if they've gotten their tests yet, but that was going to be the next piece. So different places that you'll be able to pick up, and we'll let the public know what those are going to be. Next, we have our broadcast or print deadline for September, which I do not know what the date is for that. I feel like it was supposed to be today. So we'll skip that. And then lastly, the joint meeting with the school committee is occurring tomorrow. It is a Zoom meeting. The information, I believe, is posted on our webpage already. If you do not have an email to it, the agenda is posted with the Zoom information.
Can you give me the ID numbers?
I'll send you the link, to the agenda. It's on the Board of Health page, so I'll send that.
Thank you. Thank you.
So obviously we'll show them
Tomorrow night. It'll be tomorrow night.
It's tomorrow night.
It's going to be tomorrow night. Okay, 7 o'clock.
7 p.m. start time. Correct.
Thank you. Thank you.
So we're going to start and just show them the two documents that we went over today, the crisis response guide and the decision support tool, just in order to, like we already said, show them kind of things that we're working on that are going to help us make our decisions move forward, and then have the discussion with them to say, what systems can we come up with? What plans can we put into place for the schools and the Board of Health and the families in our community to work together and understand how things are going to function and look forward to things. I don't know what plans we will produce, if any, but I think we want to talk about testing, as we've already talked about. We'd love access to that data because it's such an insight into the health of our community, but also love to talk about plans for, the potential scenarios that might come up. Right now, things are relatively smooth. Even though our numbers are bouncing around still, I feel like the community feels like things are pretty much over. And it would be great if that happens and it stays the same and nothing ever pops up. But I would love to have a little bit of planning about some potential circumstances that could arise. So that will be tomorrow's meeting. Are we for sure having a quorum attend?
I'll be there tomorrow.
Gino?
I'll be here. Yep.
Kevin? Yes. Dan? No? Okay.
I'm not available.
Okay. But that's at least 3, and I'm pretty sure Kevin Baker plans to attend as well. So we will see you for that. Any correspondence that we're aware of?
I haven't received any.
Oh, Jim, you sent out that additional document about the share tables.
Oh,
So
actually,
I talked to Kevin earlier today and said the school department had sent this to me. I said that they're looking for board approval on it. I said that really, I'll send it to you so you can share it with the board, see what their thoughts were. I mean, from, getting kind of a quick glance at it, I get what they're trying to do. Seems relatively low public health threat. It seems to be kind of limited to fresh fruits and vegetables and milk that gets stored in a cool tray. The vegetables, I guess, as long as they were, and it's all about the monitoring. The goal, I mean, I guess, kind of backing out of it, the kids are supposed to take a balanced diet when they leave the cafeteria. The cafeteria folks know that they throw some of the stuff they don't like in the rubbish on the way out of the line. The goal is to try to capture some of that so that maybe somebody else who might want it would have it. Things like the milk, I guess they can keep for that lunch period, but then that has to be thrown at the lunch period too. But so then it's just the fresh fruits and vegetables. I thought they did a nice job with their kind of SOP in there. But again, it's really something where it's school and kids that it probably would warrant a broader Board of Health review and thought about that to the school.
Yeah, on initial read, you start to just imagining half-eaten pieces of pizza thrown on a table here. But when you get into the meat of it and what the specific items they're talking about, it makes a heck of a lot more sense.
Yeah, I couldn't even think of the name of the document. I come up with like the used food table, and he's like, "What?" It's like, "No, I'm sorry. It's
the gently loved food table.
pre-chewed food only. Pre-chewed food only. Yeah. My one comment is I actually read through it. I thought it was initially I was like, okay, we'll see where this goes. It looks like they put some really good thought into it. The only thing that I saw, they spelled out all the TLAs, or 3-letter acronyms as they're called in the industry, except for one in section item number 6D. There is something in there that calls apple slices are TCS food items. I have no idea what a TCS is. So feedback on them. I know it's nitpicky, but I don't know what a TCS is, and I'm sure they do. If they could just spell that out, because every other TLA that they have in the document, they've spelled out before the first use, which is tradition. So somebody just needs to go through and do that. Otherwise, my main concern is if I know the milks are sealed at the top because they're little boxes or they're bottles that they like have a sealed container. My only thing is making sure that there's been no tamper with the milks and that the temperature is maintained. That's my big thing that I have a concern over, or a temper with any of the food that's sealed, actually.
So because this is going to require a vote, we probably just need to have it on our agenda for a public hearing then at a future meeting.
Agreed, Vice Chairman.
Perfect.
Does the school have a timeline? My guess is they want to implement this at start of school, which is before our next meeting. I'm not sure. I don't think this would necessarily warrant a special meeting for it, but we just want to make sure that they're aware that it might not be approved from this side before school starts.
I can send.
And it looks like
I can send them an email saying that you're going to put it on your agenda for the next meeting to discuss and approve or consider.
Thank you.
Yeah.
it looks like TCS is time and temperature controlled, or time and temperature controlled sensitive foods.
So think
So
perishable.
things like meats and all that safe zone kind of stuff.
There was something that they should just spell out. It's really easy. I understand what it could be, but I have a whole lot of other things that it could be in my head.
All right. Lastly, member updates. Kevin Davis, what do you have?
Member updates. So, been monitoring the news on the new and upcoming booster shots for Omicron enabled. Looking like BA.4/5, looks like Pfizer and Moderna are both coming out of the gate. Yay, please have this. Everybody start paying attention, go get boosted, go get all that kind of good stuff, because fingers crossed, it'll actually have an impact to the latest stuff. There was one other thing I wanted to talk about. I don't remember what it is. Maybe it'll come back to me later on. But other than that, I'm concerned about some of the layers of Swiss cheese going away during this school year. I really want to be able to say that our town's going to continue testing. I think that is one of those ways that we look at the health of our community and the health of our school system, since this is where, some of that is. So having some sort of community testing goals, I think we really need to figure that out. I understand that there may not be money set aside, but we've really got to figure that out to try to look see on that type of thing for the schools. I also know when early on when we were trying to figure this out, about December of 2021, there was a presentation that was given to the Board of Health about testing and what we could do about it. And there was a company that had the ability to basically do the pooled testing and get it down to like 2 people that you could test. So that was something that would help our nursing staff at school tremendously, versus having the 12 or 15 people that they have to do secondary tests on if a pool comes back positive, depending upon the size of the pools, yada, yada. The protocol on this was they were able to scale it down to say it's one of these individuals that are added in that pool area. So that's something that we should think about. Trying to think, there was one more thing, but I don't remember anything else right at the moment. So if I remember what it is, I'll raise my hand appropriately and say me, and come back. So.
Sure. No guarantee. Gino.
I guess you're right about getting boosted, and let's see if we need any other shots. The question is, let's see what happens. We have to be careful.
Yeah.
That's
Cross our
it.
fingers for that to
I
come
mean,
out soon.
I concur what he said. We got to be careful. The kids should be tested, because they are the first one to get sick. And if they're positive, they should get, don't let them go to school. It's good to have that system. They can't and check them. We have to worry about the kids so they don't get sick and everybody else gets sick.
I agree. Dan.
Following up on kind of the booster piece, keep your eyes open for most recent updates as they're coming down the pike. We still know that August is immunization month in general. We know we have lots of folks who have, certainly from the kid side, have fallen behind in their immunizations through the COVID process. Hopefully they are catching up, but please be aware. For those of us not quite so young anymore, some of the preventative ones, such as shingles and pneumovax, and some of those kind of simply as tetanus boosters, may have kind of fallen by the wayside through the last couple of years. So check your own status, check with your PCPs, and see if there's anything you need to do to get caught up and brought up to date to make sure that we are not only safe from COVID, but safe from all the other things that were always trying to hurt us through all the years.
Good point.
True.
Kevin, anything else?
Thank you.
My only thing was, as an adult, make sure you definitely check with your primary care physician, your PCP, about your polio status, polio titers, if you're traveling in and around the New York City state area. Definitely want to go make sure that you're, as an adult, you're all set, ready to go. But yeah, that was the thing that I remembered.
Yeah. Especially in New York, you are correct.
Our agenda is clear. So a motion to adjourn.
I will make a motion to adjourn.
10 seconds. Roll call vote. Kevin Davis,
Kevin Davis says yes.
Gino Fredolini,
Gina Ferroni say yes. Thank you
Dan
for
Kane.
coming.
Dan Kane says yes.
and Matt Wason votes yes. Thank you, everyone, for a good meeting. See you
I want-
in just
I want
over.
to say thank you to Jim. Jim, thank you for coming and give us some.
Welcome, Gino. Good to see you all.
Thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thanks, everybody.
God
Thanks,
bless.
Jim.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you, Dave. Thanks, Matt, for picking up.
Yep.
See, Matt, it was a good thing that you